AWS offers us a few different options if we want to buy resources in advance or just buy them temporarily. So we're going to talk about that now. The first is reserved instances, and that allows us to purchase or agree to purchase the usage of an EC2 instance in advance for a significant discount. And it also can provide reserved capacity when we specify an AZ. So in disaster recovery situations, if we want to make absolutely sure that we're going to have those resources in a disaster when we really need them, reserved instances tagged to an AZ is one way we can reserve that capacity and guarantee that. AWS billing will automatically apply this discount whenever you launch an instance that matches the instance type or the family of your reserved instance. EC2 has 3 reserved instance types: standard, convertible, and scheduled. And you can also buy reserved instances on RDS as well. Now, if you have consolidated billing set up for multiple accounts, you can share reserved instances across those accounts, which is another benefit of consolidated billing. And if for some reason you find that you don't need your reserved instance, you can try to sell it on a secondary market called the Reserved Instance Marketplace. Let's look at the differences between a standard and a convertible reserved instance. Well, the terms are the same. You can do it 1 year or 3 years, and there's a variety of upfront payments, partial payments, or no upfront payments. Generally, you're realizing between a 40 to 60% discount on a standard, and you give up some of that savings on a convertible because convertibles are a bit more flexible. So on average, you're saving between 31% and 54%. So for both reservation types, you can change the AZ, the size, or the networking type via the console or an API call. One of the big differences, though, is that for a standard, you can't change the instance family, or the OS, or the tenancy. But for a convertible, you can change the instance family. And if over the term of the reservation, prices go down on that particular instance, you can realize that price reduction on a convertible, but not so on a standard. And presently, right now, only standard instances are saleable on the Reserved Instance Marketplace. That's that secondary market. AWS says that sometime soon you're going to be able to sell convertible instances on the marketplace. So if we look at some of the attributes of a reserved instance, we have to define the instance type. That's just the memory, the CPU, the networking capabilities. We have to define what we want as far as a platform. Then we have to decide what we want as our tenancy, either shared or dedicated. And optionally, we can define an availability zone. Now, if we do happen to choose an availability zone, that reserved instance and that discount is only going to apply to that AZ. And that's called a zonal reserved instance. The benefit there is it creates that availability guarantee in that AZ that I was talking about before. If you don't choose an AZ, well, you get the flexibility to use that reserved instance in any AZ, but you don't get the guaranteed availability in any one AZ. And you can change back and forth between zonal and regional on the console or via API. So we have our reserved instance over here on the left, an M4 2X large, Linux, default tenancy, and we've chosen a availability zone, US West 2B. Amazon creates a reservation for us in US West 2B, and that's going to be discounted whenever we spin one up. And it's always going to be available. We're going to be guaranteed that compute power in that US West 2B. Now for a regional reserved instance, same machine type, but we haven't specified an availability zone. So we can use that in US West 2C. The difference here is it's not guaranteed. We're still going to get the discount. Now additionally, we can get a discount on other resources that are in that same family. So we can spin up 2 M4X larges and realize that same discount. So a special note here is that instance size flexibility is only available for Linux regional RIs with default tenancy. It's not available for Windows, Red Hat, or SUSE. Let's talk about spot instances. At any one time, AWS has lots of excess capacity, and that's just due to the nature of the business. They don't know when we're going to ask for more resources, so they always have to have it available. But the genius here is they've been able to monetize that excess capacity on a market exchange basis. And so a spot instance process starts by a customer creating a spot request. You have to specify an AMI and a desired instance type, and some other key information like a VPC and so forth. And then you define the highest price you're willing to pay for that instance. And if the capacity is constrained and others are willing to pay more, your instance might get terminated or stopped. And spot requests can be a one-time only, a maintain, or a duration-based. One-time only I call fill and kill. So it spins up a spot instance if your price is higher than the going rate, and it will get rid of that request. Maintain, on the other hand, will reprovision a spot instance if by chance the price rises too high and it gets terminated, and then the price goes back down below your maximum bid. Maintain will recreate another spot instance. Same thing goes if you go out and manually terminate it. A maintain spot request will make a new spot instance pop right back up. Duration-based is a finite period of time. So for example, maybe I only need a spot instance for 3 hours. And I can set up my price, I can set up the duration, and then after that duration is over, my spot instance gets terminated and that request goes away. So for the one-time request, the fill and kill, whenever the price gets above my price point, the instance is going to be terminated and any ephemeral data I had there is going to be lost. But for the request and maintain, I can configure the instance to terminate, stop, or hibernate until the price point can be met again. So I don't necessarily have to destroy or lose my data. Here's a picture of market fluctuations on a certain instance type. In this case, it's a P3 8X large, and this is over a period of 3 months. And you can see there's the on-demand price. What's interesting here is the fluctuation independent of the availability zone. And usually what that means is that somebody took out a large position or a large request of P3 8X large instances for, in this case, availability zone US West 2B. And so that drove the price up almost, or at least approaching, the on-demand price. Whereas if I were to just go to a different AZ, that demand wasn't there, so the price remained low. This is an important point when thinking about architecting with spot instances, because the price and the demand can fluctuate between availability zones. And so thinking about architectures that allow you to spin up in any availability zone so you can really maximize the cost savings. Most of the spot instance pricing looks rather boring, more like this. This is a 3-month look at a T2 small. And sometimes if I want a cheap instance, I'll create a spot request and then specify some bid that's in excess of the on-demand price. That way I realize the benefit of the lower price most of the time. And I'm also covered if the price rises, because most likely all the other people are going to stop bidding once the price rises above the on-demand price. Let's talk about the differences between dedicated instances and dedicated hosts. Now, a dedicated instance is placed on hardware that's dedicated just for you. Now, that same underlying hardware may also support non-dedicated instances that are in your same account, but it's only going to be from your account. And dedicated instances are available as on-demand, reserved, or spot instances, but they incur an additional $2 per hour per region cost. Now, a dedicated host, on the other hand, is the physical hardware underneath, and you have control over which instances are deployed on those various dedicated hosts. And they're available as on-demand, or you can get a dedicated host reservation. And this is useful if you have some server-bound software license that needs to access cores or sockets or per virtual machine. Now, each dedicated host can only run one type of EC2 instance. So you can't mix and match instance types on a host. You have to run all the same type. And the capacity of the dedicated host varies depending on what EC2 instance types you're going to be running. So to summarize, dedicated instance is still a virtual machine. It just resides on hardware that you don't share with anybody else. A dedicated host is a physical machine that you can put your own instances on.